Despite what you may have seen on Twitter and other social media, the Celtics had a very successful 2020 season. They were 2 games away from the finals, even though their 4th best player, Gordon Hayward, was out for most of their run, and when he came back, it was clear he wasn't at 100. He didn't even start for them. Some people are saying the Celtics missed their best chance at a championship this year, and others are saying they'll definitely get better in the coming years in all ways. I don't think it's as simple as reducing it to either of those views, so let's take a look at it. We can start by evaluating what we learned from this year's bubble playoff run. In the first round, they dominated a Sixers team that was missing Ben Simmons, and they did it largely through taking advantage of the Sixers' poor game plan against the pick and roll. The Sixers were playing a pretty deep drop coverage, and Kemba and Tatum made them pay. The Sixers struggled to adjust to the Celtics, and the series wasn't really close. Kemba and Tatum are 2 of the best pull-up 3-point shooters in the league, so you can't really rely on them just not making shots. Against the Raptors, the Celtics were a slight underdog according to most fans, but during the series, we saw a great coaching chess match between Nick Nurse and Brad Stevens, where each team attacked specific players and found different ways to hide their weaker defenders. This series went to 7 games and was close, but the Celtics generally looked like the better team throughout. And, it would have been a shorter series if not for the amazing OG Anunoby shot with half a second left. And Siakam also underperformed, so the Celtics just looked like they were more ready throughout the whole thing. Against the Heat, they lost in 6, and it seemed like it was a different player giving them problems every game. Dragic was doing well in the beginning of the series, but then Brad Stevens put Smart onto him, so that kind of offset it. Then there was a Tyler Hero game, and then Bam especially dominated them during Game 7 with help from 4 Iguodala threes.
I want Iguodala. That's right.
Offensively, the Celtics struggled a lot against the zone, especially earlier in the series, and it seemed weird to me considering how good of a coach Brad Stevens is and how talented their players are. But they don't have a dominating big man. They just have Tice, who's, don't get me wrong, he's solid and kind of underrated, but he's just not going to be able to bully the Heat down low in the zone. Tatum was unable to make plays to break the zone, and they didn't look ready for it. They didn't make snappy decisions, they didn't really attack the middle that much. And Jeff Van Gundy kept saying, "You can drive a zone," if you didn't get that from watching the games. In Hayward's first game back against the Heat, he played well against the zone, and even though his numbers didn't show it, he was a really big factor in that. And weirdly, Daniel Tice, even though I just said he's not that good, he was their best guy at flashing to the free throw line, and that should not be the case. Still, the series was pretty close and the Celtics did well. Something the Celtics struggled with was maintaining leads and closing out games. In their last game against the Heat, they gave up a lead, then proceeded to just shoot threes instead of taking time to dissect the defense. Like, the Heat were giving them semi-open threes, and the Celtics just kept taking them instead of adjusting. They also gave up leads earlier in the playoffs, even in games they won. Like, they would be winning by a lot against the Raptors, and then they let the lead get blown, but they still pull out the game barely. I think part of the reason why they struggled in the clutch was because they haven't figured out who to rely on and how much. They're still figuring out their identity. There were times when Jaylen Brown wasn't getting involved in the offense, even though he consistently made big shots and big plays in general. There were times where Kemba looked a little too passive, and at times Tatum was settling for bad shots, especially threes relatively early in the shot clock. Let's also not forget the fact that Marcus Smart thinks he's Michael Jordan and Steph Curry combined. This leads me to my next point, which is that Marcus Smart should never be taking more shots than Kemba, Jaylen, and Jason Tatum, and even a healthy Hayward. It happened too many times throughout the playoffs, and there's no excuse. In Game 6 against the Heat, he had 20 points on 8 for 22 shooting, including 3 for 14 from 3. There's just no reason for this, and Brad Stevens has to get that under control. I understand that the defense gives shots to him since there are other good options on the team that they try to take away, but any opponent is going to jump with joy seeing Marcus Smart take contested threes with 16 seconds left on the shot clock. Another thing that hurt the Celtics was the weak bench. Every team they faced had a better bench, and the Celtics were forced into significant minutes from Brad Wanamaker, Grant Williams, Enes Kanter, Robert Williams, and Semi Ojeleye. While these guys weren't horrible all the time, they just don't compare to the benches they were going up against in the second and third rounds. There's also Daniel Tice, who I keep saying isn't bad. He's pretty underrated, but he was still getting exposed, especially by Bam, as you saw against the Heat. He's only a slight positive on offense while being an average defender. It was most problematic against the Heat, where he couldn't even contain Bam and keep up with the rest of the team, like zipping back and forth on the court on defense, being a zero on offense. If we look at these problems, they're all honestly pretty fixable, the bench issue being the hardest one to deal with. The team will learn how to close, and I think Jaylen Brown should have more offense run for him in clutch time, as he's consistently shown he's ready for those moments. It also keeps up the Celtics' strength in that they have multiple 20-point scorers who can put up 30 plus on any given night. I'm not saying he should be the primary creator and like ISO all the time in the clutch, because he's currently not that type of player, but having plays called for him, screens set for him, and having him attack off the catch more often would be nice. He's not the best at starting plays, but he is maybe their best player at finishing those plays. If we look at the individual players, moving forward, Kemba needs to find more ways to be aggressive on and off the ball, especially when he's in with the bench units. When he gets it going, he's very hard to stop. He was good overall through the playoffs, and I think people are exaggerating his struggles because of that one 5-point game against the Raptors. He was still taking advantage of the fact that defenses had to respect him by making plays and being unselfish, especially against the Heat, where a lot of their game plan was designed to take away stuff from Kemba, such as the threat of his pick and roll game. Still in that series, he averaged nearly 20 points and 5 assists on 56% true shooting, which is pretty good, especially for a second option against a really good defense. As for Tatum, he performed pretty well through the playoffs and showed everyone he's already a star in this league and is still on the way up. He still needs to work on his playmaking, as it proved to be a problem against good teams and in clutch situations, but it has improved. His decision making on offense is good, but there were times where he was taking shots that were clearly bad and he was making decisions maybe a little bit too slow. It clearly has improved and his assist numbers are going up, but he needs to be able to make the little plays and hockey assists and make them more quickly. That's part of what gave him trouble in the zone, his lack of real high level playmaking, but I assume it'll come as he took a giant leap this year and has much more to go. Still, he was good. He averaged 25 points, 10 rebounds, and 5 assists in the playoffs on good efficiency, which is really good. Jaylen Brown played well in the playoffs also, and showed that he can be the second or third option on this team. He averaged 21.8 points, 7.5 rebounds, and 2 assists on 47% from the field and 35.8% from 3. That's pretty good. He was at his best when he was aggressive on both ends of the floor, and his shooting was good too, on pretty high volume. His ball handling and general control have shown improvement, and I suspect they'll continue that way in the coming years. We'll probably see more playmaking and ISO skills come from him, but in general, I'd like to see more plays called for him, as he's really good in capitalizing advantages created for him by Kemba and Tatum. As for Gordon Hayward, he just can't stay healthy, and when he came back, he wasn't 100% it seemed. He did well in his game back even if the counting stats didn't show it, but you really want to see him at his best. It's likely he'll accept his player option, and I don't know if the Celtics intend to trade him, since I don't know any deals that are practical surrounding him, but that's a whole other topic on its own. They'll likely just have to hope he stays healthy, as his injuries seem to be pretty unlucky considering they aren't connected to each other. With most players who are injured a lot, it's like a nagging knee or an ankle or whatever, but with Gordon Hayward, it's something new every time. But still, he's a smart player and a great fourth option, especially at 100%, so if he stays healthy, this team can be a threat. With everything considered, I think the Celtics are generally trending upward, but they missed a great opportunity to win a championship this year. They exceeded expectations slightly, but there were definitely people who thought they should be in the finals this year. In hindsight, it's clear they could have taken it further if not for the problems in maintaining leads and Gordon Hayward's health. While Brown and Tatum will continue to improve, it's possible we have already seen the best of Hayward and Kemba due to age and health. Remember, Kemba just got healthy when the bubble started, and Hayward seems like he's been injured for the past 3 years now. Tatum will also be getting a max, so that affects their flexibility moving forward even after Hayward's player option is up. Maybe the Celtics need to make some moves to upgrade the bench and or center position, but maybe that growth comes from within as they have young guys like Romeo Langford and Robert Williams who have shown signs of promise. They also have the 14th pick in this year's draft, so they have stuff to work with. The team will also improve in how they play with each other, as this was the first year they had together. Still, we have to consider the fact that their competition is improving too, especially with injured stars coming back for the Nets and the Warriors. Considering everything though, I don't think there's a real reason to be worried about the future of the Boston Celtics, especially when they have the most promising young wing pairing in the league and a really good organization.